This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You're watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
So on my latest video, and obviously please go check that one out, I spoke about the WBC rankings, of course the new ones, and some discrepancies that I thought were a little bit amiss. As in, Dominic Breazeale is of course the WBC mandatory, like it or not, that is what that is. And he's number 3. It's a bit strange that a mandatory would be ranked number 3. And Luis Ortiz was pushed up to number 2. Even though he lost to the WBC champion, Deontay Wilder, he had a fight last weekend against Razvan Kajanu, and that moved him up to number 2. So even though he lost to Wilder on the original one, he went down to 4th. He beat Kajanu, and he got moved up to number 2. But yet you'll be seeing quite clearly on this list that Alexander Povetkin has been dropped altogether. Now, of course, he does have a title fight with Anthony Joshua, which of course had nothing to do with the WBC. So they have said, you know what, we're going to drop you. But for me, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. Number one, if Povetkin was to win that fight, okay, fine, he can't be ranked by the WBC, we get that. But if he was to lose, then surely his number 3 position, which was originally, then he should only be dropped by a couple of places, right? According to their logic, as that's what they've done with Luis Ortiz, right? So even if he was to lose, he should still be ranked by the WBC. But of course, if he was to win, fair enough. If he was to draw, again, he should maintain his position, right? But anyway, they don't want that. So their whole idea of the WBC is quite simply Anthony Joshua beat somebody who's not ranked by the WBC. But he was, wasn't he? We know he was. The other one was Tony Bellew, ranked number 4 after beating David Haye. But ultimately, of course, a lot of you guys are saying, well, Tony Bellew is or was the WBC Cruiserweight champion and still the WBC Emirates champion. So that's kind of fair enough, although I don't believe that Tony Bellew beats too many people there, but who knows, who knows. And of course, I did miss out the fact that Hughie Fury is ranked number 12, but the reason that I missed him out is because he's going to be going for Kubrat Pulev for the IBF mandatory position. Joseph Parker keeps his number 6 position, beside the fact that he's lost his last 2 fights. One was a unification fight where he was champion. So again, for me, he shouldn't be dropped too much, although I know the WBO did a pretty big number on him. And of course, he lost against Dillian Whyte on the last one. Again, he lost to the number 1 WBC, but he maintains his position. But number 5, Tyson Fury, they've put him in at number 5 because the WBC want it to look like Deontay Wilder is fighting a legitimate contender, a top 5 rated heavyweight. He is lineal champion, but he's lineal champion because he hasn't been fighting for 2.5 years, and he's come back, where he's come out of nowhere, fights Seferi and gets an immediate ranking of number 7. Hasn't had a fight since Seferi, although he does have one coming up next week against Francisco Pianeta before he goes on and takes on Wilder. We've talked about that one to death, so I'm going to leave that one alone, but he's number 5. That is a bit of a farce, to be honest. And again, there's some other ones that, you know, like Jarrell Miller, he's not on the list because he's not with the WBC Clean Boxing Program. That's why he's not ranked. But yeah, the WBC rankings, not too good. There's some parts that I do agree with, that the fact that they kept Dillian Whyte as number 1, even though he's not the mandatory, which is ridiculous. And I agree that Joseph Parker should be in the top 10. I think 6 because he has lost his last 2, albeit one of them was against Anthony Joshua for unification. But either way, I'm happy that he's still top 10. A couple of them I'm not too happy about. Marius Wack and Johan Duapa on the top 15, and Charles Martin on the top 15. I don't agree with that. But Charles Martin and Adam Kownacki will be fighting soon, so that will sort out that one anyway. I don't know anything about Oscar Rivas, so I can't say. But I'm happy that Andy Ruiz Jr. is part of the top 15. So anyway, that was a WBC. Go check out that video for a more in-depth move around of everything. So that was Deontay Wilder's list, okay? Now, actually, I know a few people have been saying that, or asking, why is Anthony Joshua not on here? It's because he's champion of another sanctioning body. He's not WBC champion, that's why. Okay, so let's move on to Anthony Joshua's. Of course, he has 3 titles. WBA, the Super WBA at that, the IBF, and the Super WBO. Okay, so that, what you're seeing on the list right now, is the top 15 from all his titles. I've actually deleted the previous one, which showed, so I don't quite know who's moved around what, where and when. It could be identical for all I know. But there are some notable ones on there. I can see that Junior Farr is number 12 with the WBO, so that's good for a New Zealander. And there are some other ones as well. Otto Wallin, he's ranked number 9 for the IBF and WBA. He's from Sweden, undefeated fighter. So this could actually be a potential fight for somebody who really wants to jump into the rankings with Otto Wallin, which is a real good one. Now, there are a couple of guys on here who I don't know who they are. I've never heard of them before, which is Bogdan Dinu. He's ranked number 14 WBA and IBF. I'll be honest, I've never ever heard of him. And of course, I've never heard of WBO number 14 and 15 Ebenezer Tete and number 15 Jean-Pierre Augustin. I don't know who they are, to be perfectly honest. And I'm not too happy with the fact IBF have put Erkan Tepe as number 10. Erkan Tepe, a well-known drugs chick. Now again, I can be critical as well. The fact that, you know, the WBC, they have Tony Bellew ranked as number 4. And they have Luis Ortiz ranked as number 2. And Tyson Fury as number 5. Yet neither of those guys appear on any of these sanctioning bodies here. Now, I agree that Tyson Fury shouldn't be ranked because he's only come back and fought Cesar Seferi. We know at one time he did hold all these belts that you're looking at on the screen here after he beat Vladimir Klitschko, but he's been inactive, so we don't know how good he is, which is why I'm querying the fact that he's ranked so high with the WBC when he was never part of the WBC anyway. Okay, for me, this is all about making it look like Deontay Wilder's fighting a legitimate top guy. Well, on paper he is, because we all know Tyson Fury, and of course he's still the lineal champion, and he's undefeated, of course, but we don't know how good he is. He could be bum level for all we know, and that's the truth of it, okay? So again, Luis Ortiz, he's not on his ranking. We know about the WBA, the fact that they have actually suspended him for that original VADA failed test when he was supposed to fight Deontay Wilder originally. I disagreed wholeheartedly that the WBA should remove him from the rankings. And the reason for it, the WBC deemed him innocent, as in he did actually take high blood pressure medication. He just forgot to put it on the form. The WBA didn't believe any of that. So again, they did what they believe, not what they know. So for me, Luis Ortiz should at least be ranked by the WBA, not suspended by them. But why is Luis Ortiz not on the IBF or WBO? Even a 15th place would be something, but he's not even ranked there either. Tony Bellew, again, you know, he's beaten David Haye. Now, when Tony Bellew originally fought David Haye the first time around, David Haye was number 1. In fact, he was the mandatory for the WBO to take on Joseph Parker when he was champion. So by that thinking, he should be replacing David Haye, right? But he wasn't at all. So I don't quite know why Tony Bellew isn't ranked either. Now, let's look on to Anthony Joshua. Of course, he is the champion of all 3 of these, and he's going to be taking on Alexander Povetkin. So you can see that one is going to change after this fight. Okay, Alexander Povetkin is the WBA mandatory. As you can see there, Manuel Charr is in there as well, because he's a WBA regular. At some point, Charr and Joshua, or whichever champions they are going to have to meet at some point to solidify that one belt. Okay, but he's going to be taking on Alexander Povetkin, and if he was to beat Povetkin, that changes quite a few things around. As you can see, just in the WBO, Dillian Whyte and Jarrell Miller will move up, so Dillian Whyte will be the official number 1, and it wouldn't surprise me if they made Dillian Whyte versus Jarrell Miller for the next mandatory for the WBO. I really wouldn't be surprised. But there's going to be quite a few changes, which we're going to get into in this video. So Alexander Povetkin taking on Anthony Joshua is going to change a little bit of the landscape that, you know, you're looking at right there. As I've already said, with Manuel Charr, he's going to be taking on Fraser Quendo. Fraser Quendo shouldn't even be ranked in the top 100 in the world, never mind number 2. We know why Fraser Quendo is ranked there, because he was promised an opportunity at the WBA title ever since his loss to Ruslan Chagayev, because they accused him of taking PEDs, which in fact it turned out that Fraser Quendo wasn't taking PEDs. But even so, whether he was or whether he wasn't, he lost to Ruslan Chagayev anyway, so he shouldn't be getting a WBA world title shot anyway. But either way, this is the decision that they've come up with, so what can you do? So again, Fraser Quendo, once he gets trounced by Manuel Charr, which I imagine he probably will, at least Fraser Quendo will be out of the rankings altogether, because he doesn't deserve a ranking, in my honest opinion. As I said, he hasn't even had a fight in best part of 3 years. So anyway, so moving on there, if you look at the IBF, you can see that Kubrat Pulev and Hughie Fury, these guys will be actually fighting each other very, very soon. In fact, I believe the purse bid is actually today. Okay, so we'll find out what's going to happen. Hughie Fury's team, Peter Fury, his dad, his trainer, has already said that he's quite happy for Hughie to go to Bulgaria. And whether or not it goes to purse bid or whether they get it sorted out before purse bid even, it looks like Pulev versus Hughie Fury. Because we know that Jarrell Miller, who's ranked number 3 on the IBF, has turned down that opportunity. But yet he's managed to keep his position with the IBF. But yet Dillian Whyte, who turned down the opportunity because he wanted a bigger fight, and you know what, he's guaranteed a fight with Anthony Joshua anyway, so he didn't actually need the mandatory, and for the peanuts that he was getting, he could earn a whole lot more money by fighting Parker or Luis Ortiz. Ultimately he chose Joseph Parker. So Jarrell Miller is still ranked number 3, but Dillian Whyte has been dropped altogether by the IBF. That's ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. But once Kubrat Pulev and Hughie Fury fight, you can see that it will change a little bit with the rankings, because the number 1, where it's not rated, will then be filled. Okay, so, and whoever loses will be dropped right the way down, or at least in theory anyway. So that's that one. So we know that Kubrat Pulev will actually fight against Hughie Fury for the WBF, or sorry, the IBF mandatory position. So moving on there, as you can see on the screen, these are 2 fights that are confirmed, which again will mess up or change around even the ranking system for WBA and IBF, especially when we have Adam Kownacki taking on Charles Martin. That will be on the Sean Porter versus Danny Garcia undercard, so that will sort that one out. And of course we have Trevor Bryan taking on BJ Flores. For me, I don't think that BJ Flores should even be ranked that high with the WBA. I think that the WBA are quite generous with some of the older fighters, as you can see on their list. They do like some of the older fighters. But anyway, that will change up a few things when Trevor Bryan takes on BJ Flores. One of these guys will go up, the other one will go down, and with the winner of Kownacki and Charles Martin, which again does sort out number 9 and number 10 with the WBC as well. Okay, so again, that's going to change up the rankings, and that will be very, very soon, as I said, on the Porter and Garcia undercard. Now, let's look at the whole thing right here for WBA, IBF and WBO. Now, which is the ones that kind of could really change things up? Now, for me, I'm looking at Joseph Parker. Now, obviously, he's lost to Anthony Joshua in the last fight, and or sorry, the fight before that, and the last fight, Dillian Whyte. So what does he do next? What kind of moves could he make to get back into the rankings across all of the sanctioning bodies? Because now at the minute I've highlighted WBO, but of course he's number 7 with the IBF and number 6 with the WBC. But yeah, he's not ranked at all by the WBA, unless of course I'm blind. But either way, for me, I think that Joseph Parker, it would be a good opportunity for him and Junior Farr to have their rematch. Of course, these guys fought in the amateurs, both New Zealanders. That would be a pretty popular fight, especially in New Zealand, right? So for me, that would be great. If not, why not look at the likes of Fujimoto of Japan? That's a very winnable fight for Joseph Parker, and a good comeback fight. Bryant Jennings, if you want to fight in America, obviously when he fights in America, he's part of Top Rank. So Bob Arum, Bryant Jennings is a Top Rank fighter. So that would make a lot of sense. If not, then Zhilei Zhang, I believe he's a Chinese fighter. I might be wrong on that one. But I've never seen him fight. But again, it was talked about before he took on Dillian Whyte. So Joseph Parker has quite a few options that, for me, I would quite like. That's just my pick. In the ideal situation, it would be Junior Farr, but if not, then Fujimoto, Jennings or Zhang. If not, outside of all that, maybe a Lucas Brown fight. But I heard Lucas Brown, he wants a couple of fights before he even thinks about taking on Parker, because obviously he lost to Dillian Whyte himself. So anyway, that is what it is. So back onto the whole landscape of things. Again, what kind of things would change it all about? Dillian Whyte. So Dillian Whyte, let's open up all of the sanctioning bodies. WBC, he's ranked number 1 WBC, number 6 WBA, and number 2 WBO, and not ranked at all IBF, because he didn't take the Pulev fight, because he wanted a bigger, tougher fight, and obviously more money in that as well against Joseph Parker. So the IBF dropped him altogether. But yeah, Jarrell Miller did pretty much the same, where he refused to fight Kubrat Pulev, and in fact is now taking on Thomas Adamek. But yet he keeps his position as number 3 IBF. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, that's the position of where Dillian Whyte is across all the sanctioning bodies. Okay, so what could he potentially do next? Again, just look at the WBO. He could take on Jarrell Miller, and that would sort out potentially the official number 1 or mandatory for the WBO. So, and of course, that's a fight that boxing fans would absolutely love. But we know that Dillian Whyte could potentially be fighting Deontay Wilder in April. Deontay Wilder could potentially be fighting Anthony Joshua in April. If not, Dillian Whyte could be fighting Anthony Joshua on that date, April 13th at Wembley Stadium. So, for me, if he wants to make a big statement, I like the Jarrell Miller fight and it sorts out that position. But if not, I'm quite happy for him to fight number 14 or number 15, to be honest. This Ebenezer Tete or Jean-Pierre Augustin or a Junior Farr or a Caballel or a Jennings or whatever it may be. I'm quite happy for him to do that. But if he really wants to make a statement, then I think Jarrell Miller, undefeated, and I expect him to be fully undefeated after Thomas Adamek as well on October the 6th in Chicago, then this will be a good statement. If not, then again, if we open up all the sanctioning bodies here, then why not Dominic Breazeale? Because it doesn't just sort out the mandatory position, because many of us feel that Dominic Breazeale is unfairly the mandatory for the WBC, and Dillian Whyte should actually be the mandatory or in the final eliminator for the mandatory. And I know that the WBC want to put the roadblock of Luis Ortiz there, but again, they ordered that for a secondary mandatory, which means Dillian Whyte wouldn't get a shot at the WBC title for at least 18 months, which is outrageous. So why not have Dillian Whyte versus Dominic Breazeale? That sorts out not only the WBC mandatory position, but it also sorts out the WBO position as well, because that will be soon to be, I would imagine that Joshua's going to beat Povetkin, but even so, Dillian Whyte will be moved into number 1, but he won't be the mandatory. But a fight against Dominic Breazeale would certainly probably solidify his number 1 position there, and of course become the mandatory for WBC and potentially move up his number 6 position in the WBA by a couple of places as well. Likewise, if he fought Jarrell Miller, that will sort out the WBA position as well. So he's got some pretty good options. I would like to see him take on, as I said, Jarrell Miller or a Dominic Breazeale, or just a tune-up. It doesn't really matter. But again, another possibility, Luis Ortiz, number 2 WBC. Why not just get it done? Just to prove a point that, I know some people say that he's avoiding Luis Ortiz. We all know that he's not. Okay, he was quite willing to fight him if he was guaranteed a shot at Wilder after. In fact, he went one step further and said, if I knock out Luis Ortiz, then you give me a fight next. So even if you beat Luis Ortiz on points, I know his mind is, okay, fine, you don't have to fight me next. But if I knock him out, you fight me next. But no, they didn't want to do that. So, but for me, Luis Ortiz, that would be a big fight and a very winnable fight for him as well. And it makes a bit of a statement. For me, I don't care if he beats him on points or knockout. I don't care, just as long as he beats him. Okay, again, just to prove a point, even if it's not just to appease the WBC. So if not, Dereck Chisora, a rematch. Now, I'm not too keen on a rematch, I have to be honest. I'm not against it, but just by going on the rankings, it's not a bad idea. But for the fact that Dillian Whyte's already beaten Dereck Chisora, and I know Dereck Chisora pulled off a stunning win against Carlos Takam last time out, but for me, I think Dillian Whyte would breeze through Dereck Chisora this time round. He would make sure of it, because when he fought Dereck Chisora before, this was like his 4th fight within 6 months or something. It was something crazy. Okay, so he was fatigued in that fight already. But for me, yeah, Dereck Chisora, fine. Dominic Breazeale, again, that sorts that one out. And of course, a Luis Ortiz fight. That would be an interesting one. But obviously, of course, Jarrell Miller for the WBO. That would be ideal as well. So for me, yeah, I think Dereck Chisora and Luis Ortiz or Dominic Breazeale would be absolutely fine. Now, let's look at the fights that Dillian Whyte cannot take. Okay, so I've crossed out all the ones that he can't take, and of course I've marked up the ones who are actually going to be fighting as well. So for example, Trevor Bryan versus BJ Flores in WBA, and of course Manuel Charr versus Oquendo. So Dillian Whyte can't fight any of those guys, but he can potentially fight Jarrell Miller next as well, because Jarrell Miller is fighting on the October the 6th card, so it's unlikely he'll fight him before the end of the year. So of course I'm talking about a potential fight next because he wants one before the end of the year, so maybe November, December time. Jarrell Miller, unlikely, so I took him out. Kubrat Pulev and Hughie Fury as well been taken out because them two are fighting, and Adam Kownacki and Charles Martin been taken out as well. Andy Ruiz Jr., he's going to be fighting in September against an opponent which I'll tell you all about once he officially announces it. And yeah, Tony Bellew, obviously he's looking at Alexander Usyk as well. Tyson Fury is looking at Deontay Wilder, and of course Joseph Parker. Unless of course he really wants the rematch, then for me not too much point, to be perfectly honest. And of course Povetkin and Joshua are out of that equation as well. So all the highlighted ones are pretty much what he could fight, except for the ones where I've marked up Charr against Frozequendo and Trevor Bryan versus BJ Flores. So Otto Wallin would be a good opportunity. Otto Wallin is undefeated, but Otto Wallin, number 9 IBF, number 9 WBA, that's a good opportunity. If not, number 8 in the IBF in Ajit Kabiel. Oh, of course, in the WBO as well, Otto Wallin is ranked number 11. So why not? Ajit Kabiel, of course, he beat Dereck Chisora, and he has had a fight since then as well, and won, which I didn't realise until earlier. So Ajit Kabiel, number 8 with the IBF, and number 7 in the WBC, and undefeated as well. So, you know, he would become European champion while he's waiting for the world title as well. So why not? But anyway, so that's pretty much it. So all the highlighted ones on this slide are all the guys who are currently fighting very, very soon. Okay, of course, I forgot to highlight number 3 with the WBA there in Jarrell Miller. But everybody there who is highlighted have a fight coming up. Okay, so as you can see, with these guys all fighting, the landscape is going to change pretty highly. So, you know, just to pretty much clarify that some of the things that I agree with, that Dillian Whyte is ranked number 2 with the WBO. Of course, I'm going to agree with that anyway. And the fact that he keeps his position with WBC, which isn't on this slide, but anyway. And, you know, you could really see that the landscape is going to change over the next few months. So come December time, all this is going to look way, way different. So anyway, you drop your thoughts below. A bit of a long video, so I do apologise. Drop your thoughts below. Click that thumbs up. Subscribe. Catch you all on the next video.